"Mummy, Mummy, there's a stranger with a little girl in the bushes," Cheryl exclaimed fearfully, pulling Melissa by the sleeve. That day, mother and daughter strolled leisurely through the park. For the first time in a long time, the woman had a full day off, which she naturally decided to spend with her daughter. The sun shone brightly, and everything around seemed so light and carefree that she wished to prolong this moment, preferably forever. But unfortunately, it was not possible. Melissa often recalled those years when she felt protected by her husband, as if standing behind a stone wall. Then she didn't have to worry about work, salary, or how to survive and feed herself and her little girl. Paul provided entirely for the family. He always seemed so ideal to Melissa that she couldn't imagine this illusion would ever dissipate like fog. But that day had come, and the naive, trusting Melissa at first couldn't even believe it was possible. On that fateful day, when Melissa learned of her husband's infidelity, nothing had foreshadowed trouble. The loving and caring wife and mother, as usual, was choosing from 100 possible dishes to cook that day. After her marriage, Melissa had devoted herself entirely to her family and household chores. Nothing else existed for her. The school day was about to end, and she would go to meet her daughter after lessons. She never let Cheryl go anywhere alone, even though the girl insisted. "All my classmates have been going to and from school by themselves for ages," the girl protested, when her mother once again fussed over her early in the morning. "They'll be laughing at me soon. The school is next door. You can watch me walk from the window. I assure you I'll be just fine. You're the one who keeps saying this is a good neighborhood, not a crime-ridden one. So what's the big deal? Why do I still have to walk around holding your hand and be the laughingstock of my classmates?" The other kids always treated Cheryl strangely, as if she were from another world. Utterly dependent on her mother and completely helpless, freedom-loving children didn't understand this, so they never missed an opportunity to tease their classmate, whom her mother brought every morning, not even to the school gate, but literally to the guard post. Melissa would pick up her daughter from there, strictly at the same time, like clockwork. If the woman was even a minute late, she'd frantically call her daughter, exclaiming that she shouldn't go anywhere. When Cheryl was in elementary school, she took it in her stride, even positively. Given such protective and sensitive upbringing, she was afraid of everything. But as the older Cheryl grew, the more she resented her mother's excessive care. She felt very uncomfortable when Melissa shadowed her everywhere. The girl couldn't even run to the neighbouring store for gum alone. It became so extreme that Paul decided to have a serious talk with his wife about their daughter's upbringing. "She's no longer so small that you need to patronize her to such an extent," the man stated directly, without unnecessary preamble. "From the outside, it really looks ridiculous. Don't you see and understand it yourself? Cheryl will soon develop complexes because of your hyper-parenting, which nobody needs. Think about our daughter, not your selfishness. How many times can you lecture the child? It's getting out of hand. I understand when she was little, but now it's just absurd. And you should do something useful. You do nothing but cook and clean all day long. You're stagnating, if you'll pardon me for saying so. I told you a long time ago to start your own business, especially since my finances are more than enough. Find something you like. Once you do, you'll see that I'm right. All your fears and panic about your daughter will go away. Then you'll laugh at yourself for being so paranoid. You can't be so hard on yourself. After all, you might go crazy." That time, Paul, for the first time, allowed himself to tell his wife everything he thought, all that troubled his soul. To tell the truth, his relationship with Melissa had long left much to be desired. Lately, Paul found himself increasingly irritated by his wife. He couldn't pinpoint the reason. Perhaps it was a crisis, one that all married couples eventually face. Or maybe he had simply fallen out of love with Melissa. Paul began to notice young women on the streets more often. He was particularly captivated by his secretary, Patrice, who seemed to reciprocate his interest. She constantly winked and behaved suggestively. When bringing coffee, she would deliberately lean over the table, showcasing what she believed to be her otherworldly beauty, a key in her mind to a rich and carefree life. Patrice had come to the big city precisely for this purpose. She had always dreamed of marrying well, staying at home, spending her wealthy spouse's money and doing nothing. To achieve this, she knew she had to try her best. Decent men, Patrice reasoned, don't just appear out of thin air. They're either married, divorced, or widowers. And of these options, the most suitable are the first and the third. The divorced ones? What can you expect from them? If they've abandoned one wife, possibly with children, what guarantee do I have that I won't suffer the same fate? No, no, and no again. A potential spouse must be reliable. Patrice considered Paul to be just such a man from the very first day they met. As soon as she started working for him, she set her sights on him. This wasn't surprising. Besides his material wealth, Paul was also physically attractive. Tall, well-built, strong, the kind of man people describe as Mr. Right. The fact that Paul was married didn't bother Patrice at all. On the contrary, she saw it as an advantage. He clearly had no intention of divorcing his wife, and despite the recent cooling of their relationship, Paul hadn't even considered leaving Melissa. When Patrice informed Paul that she was expecting a child, he was initially confused. "Are you sure it's mine?" he asked, which sparked a storm of indignation in Patrice. She put on such a dramatic scene that Paul could hardly calm her down. "I didn't mean anything by that." Paul tried to justify himself. "Why are you making a scene? Try to understand. I'm a married man. I have a family and a daughter, by the way. I can't just start a new life at the drop of a hat. It takes time. I need to talk to my wife. To be honest, I'm not sure if I should get a divorce. Of course, I won't abandon you and the baby either, but you have to understand, Melissa and I have been together for many years since we were young, and divorce might not be the best thing for my reputation, especially marrying you. Anyway, I'll have to think about it. You can count on me, but I'm not promising marriage." Patrice had expected something like this, the classic story of a reluctant lover who hadn't considered the possibility of fathering a child on the side. And, of course, there was the obligatory mention of the poor wife. Patrice realized that Paul might never decide to divorce, so she decided to help him in her own way. She installed a hidden camera, filmed a few episodes of their lovemaking, and after printing the pictures, planted them for Melissa to find. At first, Melissa couldn't believe the harsh reality she found herself in. "He couldn't have done this to me," she sobbed when she shared her worries with her best friend Lisa. "It just doesn't make sense. Maybe it's photoshopped. It can't be true, can it? Paul, he's such a kind, responsible, wonderful father and faithful husband. How could he get involved in that stuff? She's nothing. Her name means nothing. And we have a family, a daughter." No matter how hard Melissa tried to close her eyes to what was happening, she couldn't forgive her husband for cheating. She spent a long time weighing the pros and cons, racking her brain over whether it was worth confronting her husband. Lisa advised her friend to forget the whole story. "You said it yourself, she's just a gold digger," she reasoned. "What could he have with her that's serious? Demand that Paul fire this unscrupulous girl. That's the end of it. You're his legal wife, and who is she to him? Nobody. That's it. You can go on living your life. Take care of your house and your daughter. In your case, divorce is not an option. You can't do anything without Paul. How many years have you been out of work? Who would hire you now? And what about your daughter? Cheryl is used to a certain standard of living. You can't just take it all away from her. She certainly won't thank you if, after the divorce, she has to survive on bread and water." Melissa clearly understood the risks. Without her spouse, her life could really turn into a miserable existence. She could hardly hope to find any well-paid work, and she essentially had nowhere to live. Her parents were in their graves, and that modest, tiny apartment they had left behind would require significant expenses to make it livable. For years, Melissa had neglected dealing with her late parents' apartment, overwhelmed by family worries and troubles. Now, suddenly in need of money, she found herself at a loss. She couldn't leave things as they were. With her marriage so badly fractured, especially due to infidelity, it seemed unlikely to ever mend. Mulling over the words she'd long been choosing to explain to her husband, Melissa finally decided to talk to Paul. He never expected things to unfold this way, and immediately guessed whose handiwork it was. Patrice had been foolish and reckless. If she had not planted those incriminating photos for Melissa to find, Paul might have cared for her and their unborn child. And now, after a conversation with his wife, who immediately announced that she wanted a divorce, a terrible scandal broke out between lovers. "How could you?" Paul exclaimed indignantly, barely crossing his office threshold the next day. "Who gave you the right to meddle so brazenly in my family affairs? Who gave you the right to interfere in something that's none of your business?" "Not my business," Patrice snapped. "So that's how it is. You have a great way of doing things, my dear. I'm carrying your child. I'm making plans counting on something, and your life and family doesn't concern me. What about us? What about our baby? Or what? Our relationship doesn't mean anything to you?" Patrice was furious with her lover. She certainly hadn't expected Paul to be so weak-willed. He had always seemed so brave and determined to her, but now, he couldn't even stand up to his wife, who was entirely dependent on him. And this is called a man? Well, well, she thought to herself. She hoped she would at least be able to get decent alimony from Paul. After this scandal, she no longer counted on a future together. Did she even want it now? After all Paul had said, he hadn't minced his words. He was livid. The divorce proceedings offered Paul no benefits, only losses. He had to leave the apartment to his wife. It wasn't a gesture of goodwill, but a necessity born of desperation, rather than a sincere desire to provide decent living conditions for his former wife and daughter. Paul was thrown unbalanced, not only by Patrice's behaviour. In his opinion, Melissa was also at fault. She could have kept quiet and turned a blind eye to his little indiscretion. But no, Melissa was proud. She refused to accept that her husband was cheating on her. "Well," Paul sighed, "divorce is divorce. Let's not plunge into unnecessary red tape. We'll formalise everything amicably. I'm willing to pay alimony, but no more than that. I built this business on my own, and you have absolutely nothing to do with my capital. That's the deal, if you want this to be quick and painless." Melissa had no choice but to agree, especially since her husband promised to support their daughter adequately. This money should suffice, at least initially. Gradually, life would improve. Melissa was certain of this. After all, she wasn't the first or last woman to divorce. Many women start their lives' journey anew after separation. She would manage somehow. Cheryl remained indifferent to her parents' parting. She had never been close to her father. Paul had always wanted a son, and had no idea how to build a relationship with his daughter. He lacked both time and desire. Whether her father was present or not made little difference to Cheryl. The most important thing was that her mother was there for her. They didn't need anything else. The rest didn't matter at all. Life would go on as it would. After the divorce, Paul faithfully transferred money to his ex-wife's account, but maintained no relationship with his daughter. He'd congratulate her on holidays, though not consistently. Paul didn't regret the divorce. What was done, and there was no sense in dwelling on it. Paul lived contentedly alone. He had split up with Patrice, unable to forgive her actions. It was too much. Returning to his family was out of the question, and neither Melissa nor Cheryl waited for him. Some time after the divorce, Melissa found a decent job, which was a relief. Finding employment without experience seemed impossible, yet she managed to secure a good position quickly. Cheryl didn't miss her father. Her mother's company was sufficient. Melissa never considered bringing another man into their home. She had heard horrifying stories about mother's new lovers and wanted to avoid such fates. There was no time to think about her personal life, which she had decidedly put aside after the divorce. Work, home, work. So many cares and troubles left no room for suffering. Melissa couldn't have guessed that she would soon meet her fate by chance. Lost in thought, she didn't notice Cheryl slip away from her for a moment. The girl was followed by a peace-loving dog who led her to some unfortunate bushes from where strange sighs and moans were coming. Curious, Cheryl decided to quietly peek at what was going on there. She almost lost the power of speech when she saw the horrifying scene. A man was unceremoniously hovering over a small, defenseless girl who lay unconscious on the ground, showing no signs of life. "What are you doing?" exclaimed Melissa, who had followed her daughter to the bushes and caught sight of the tableau. "In broad daylight, and you're not afraid of anything! Well, I'll teach you, you jerk! You'll learn not to prey on little children!" Grabbing the first brick she could find, Melissa smacked the man on the back. It's fortunate she didn't hit his head, or Dr. Newberg might not have survived. At that moment, he was so focused on saving the little girl's life that he didn't even hear Melissa's outraged screams. The formidable sight of a woman with a brick in her hands terrified him. But before Dr. Newberg could turn around, he felt a searing pain. Knocked aside, he could only mumble that he was doing nothing bad with the girl. The furious Melissa and the gathered crowd had completely misunderstood the situation. "Have you gone completely mad?" Dr. Newberg exclaimed, struggling to his feet. "Are you insane? The ambulance is coming, and you're causing chaos here. How could you think such a thing? People have become utterly irrational. I can't believe it. You're making up wild scenarios. Get out, quickly. I don't want the paramedic to see this nonsense. Leave, I said. Don't you understand? I could retaliate out of anger, you know." The murmuring crowd began to disperse. Despite the crowd's dispersal, Melissa and Cheryl remained rooted to the spot, stunned and embarrassed. They had indeed misunderstood everything and misjudged the man's actions. This deeply offended the respected doctor, who had only wanted to help the unfortunate little girl. They had thought the worst of him and struck him. Luckily, the man had been a bit chilly that day and wore a leather jacket. If not for that, he might have ended up in the hospital or worse. When the ambulance arrived, Dr. Newberg helped load the little girl into the vehicle and accompanied her to the hospital. He needed to ensure everything would end safely. An operation or additional help might be needed. Molly had had a heart condition since childhood, which was why her parents never let their daughter go out alone. They always accompanied her everywhere, fearing another attack. But that day, the little girl had persuaded them. "Well, Mum, Dad, you're still busy," Molly grumbled, "and there's no telling when you'll be free. By the time you assemble all these cabinets, it will be evening. The weather outside is so nice. Why should I get in your way? I'd rather go for a walk. I'll be fine. I'm not a little girl anymore. I can take care of myself." That day, the couple had received the new furniture they'd ordered a month before. Since they'd already sold the old furniture, assembly was critical and necessary. "Where are we going to put our things?" Toya, who hated clutter, complained. "They've been in the hallway for 2 days already. No, since we both have the day off today, we'll assemble the furniture too. We must have some order in the apartment at last. I can't go here any more. We'll go for a walk another time. It's no big deal. It's not our first or last day off. We should have hired a furniture collector, but my husband always likes to save money, so now we're going to have to suffer for it. What else is there to do?" Noel was indeed a very frugal man. To put it simply, he was miserly. He would never pay an extra penny for anything. "So the furniture was made to order, to fit the design," he muttered when Toya suggested hiring assemblers. "Delivery will be free, and to assemble such a closet, and in general, what if they damage something? You know how careless these guys can be. What would we do then? Pay for restoration? Or have to order new furniture? No way. Thank you, I'm sorry. I'd rather spend a day and put it together myself. At least I'll know that nothing will happen to my cabinets and drawers, and I won't have to pay for anything extra. I hate wasting money. We could have gotten something simpler, but you're stuck on this fancy design. So, we will have designer furniture, but we'll spend the whole weekend assembling. This is what you wanted, so here you go." And so it was, with absolutely everything that involved even the slightest financial cost. Noel's account had to balance to the pennies. Not $1 less, not $1 more. The man remembered well those times when they were poor, but Toya, it sometimes seemed to him, had begun to forget them. And Noel did nothing but remind his wife of those times, regularly chiding her for excessive wastefulness. And so it was that day. While they, sweating, assembled furniture, having spared money for the services of an assembler, their little girl was on the verge of life and death. When the hospital called the father and mother, who had already had time to quarrel several times, they at first didn't even believe it was true.
"How? Did she fall in the park? What happened?"
sobbed Toya, who, abandoning all the work, immediately headed to the hospital. Agitated, Noel followed her. "I'll drive," he exclaimed, jumping into the driver's seat. Usually his wife always drove, but not this time. Toya was too distraught to orient herself even a little in space. Never once in her life had the woman felt so broken and depressed. At that moment, all Toya's thoughts were focused on only one thing. What was wrong with her girl, and how did it happen that Molly was all alone at such a difficult moment? She blamed herself for listening to her daughter and letting her go out alone, and also her husband, who had spared money for the services of the assembler, forcing them to deal with this stupid furniture.
"You miserable miser,"
Toya kept saying all the way.
"I will never forgive you if something happens to our girl."
All the way to the hospital, Toya did nothing but berate her husband. She blamed Noel for everything that had happened, although what, in fact, was his fault? That he didn't want to waste money? His frugality and unwillingness to spend every last penny on trifles? Yes, Noel was miserly, but certainly not to blame for what happened to his daughter. It was just an accident, which, moreover, ended quite safely. Molly was operated on in the hospital and everything went well. For years, her parents had been taking the girl to doctors and couldn't decide whether to do the risky surgery. And only this case and Dr. Newberg was finally able to relieve both Molly and her parents from constant worries about their daughter's health. Not for nothing was the man one of the leading cardiac surgeons in town. "If there are any more problems, you can contact me." Dr. Newberg smiled as the parents rushed into the hospital room. Melissa couldn't get the whole story out of her head. She felt very guilty towards Dr. Newberg. She realized that she had behaved disgracefully towards him. She had almost hurt him. She wanted to apologize but couldn't. It was embarrassing, and if not for her daughter, who, watching her mother's worries, suggested going to the hospital herself, it's unlikely that Melissa would have dared to meet with Dr. Newberg. "Why are you suffering, for heaven's sake?" Cheryl asked, seriously and in a completely mature way. "Go and apologize. You won't give yourself or me peace if you don't talk to him. I know you too well, so let's go together. We'll talk. We'll get to know each other. Come on, get ready, let's go." Melissa didn't expect such wisdom from her daughter. She hadn't noticed how quickly Cheryl had grown up. Not only did she talk like a grown-up woman with a wealth of life experience, but she also gave out advice. Melissa could not even imagine how this meeting would end for her. Of all people, Dr. Newberg certainly didn't expect to see her. "To be honest, I came to apologize," the woman mumbled, averting her eyes. "I'm very uncomfortable about that incident in the park. I hope you'll accept my apology. I feel terribly guilty about it. It's weighing heavily on my soul." "I understand." Dr. Newberg smiled. "It's all right. Listen, let's go somewhere. I haven't had a break in so long. I just want to drink a cup of coffee and get some fresh air. If you don't mind, of course." "I don't mind," nodded Melissa, who at that moment realized that something about Dr. Newberg had caught her eye. There was something about him, completely elusive, that Melissa couldn't explain even to herself. It wasn't just that Dr. Newberg had been so desperate to save an unknown girl, though that had played no small part in the impression he had made. It was something else. After speaking with him more, Melissa realized that Dr. Newberg intrigued her. She hadn't met such people in a long time, those with whom it was so easy to be and communicate. The woman herself didn't notice how she fell in love. However, deciding to let a man in her life was very difficult for her. Melissa was terrified of traumatizing Cheryl. She didn't know how her daughter would react. They were living so well together, and now some strange man would appear, from whom it was still unknown what to expect. Of course, Melissa didn't doubt for a second that Dr. Newberg was a decent man, but still she doubted the correctness of her decision. She had already loved, fallen in love, and what had come of it. It took the woman a long time to make a final decision. Dr. Newberg himself wasn't rushing either. He didn't push his beloved. He had lived too long as a loner to make such decisions quickly and rashly. Before proposing to Melissa, the man thought it over cautiously. Only when he realized that she was indeed the woman without whom he could no longer live a day, did he tell her that he wanted to marry her. "What? Just like that?" Melissa grinned, which left Dr. Newberg completely stunned. The man was already scared, thinking he had done something wrong, but in fact, everything was right. That's precisely what was supposed to happen. "I told you a long time ago that he is a good man," Cheryl recalled, as if she had been pushing her mother into the arms of this new acquaintance from the very beginning. The girl understood that the divorce from her father had been very difficult for her mum. In their class, many children lived with stepfathers, and Cheryl was sure that it was better than having no father at all. The daughter immediately noticed how her mother blossomed when Dr. Newberg appeared in her life. If before she had been more often serious and gloomy, after getting to know him, she changed dramatically. This couldn't escape Cheryl's attention, who always wished her mother only happiness. Melissa considered her relationship with her ex-husband Paul a forever closed chapter. After meeting Dr. Newberg, there wasn't even any resentment left in the depths of the woman's soul for her ex-husband. He did what he thought necessary. To condemn him for this would be simply foolish. Time would tell, and sooner or later, everything would fall into place. Especially since her daughter didn't miss her father at all. She didn't need him like that, unloving, uncaring, and indifferent. Dr. Newberg was quite a different matter. He was the opposite of Paul. For a family, such a man was worth his weight in gold. Melissa valued him greatly, but never repeated her old mistakes in this new marriage. She had long since ceased to be a homebody who did nothing but fuss over her husband and daughter. Now the woman had her own interests. In addition to household duties, Melissa found herself many hobbies. The divorce had worked in her favour. The woman had drawn certain conclusions. Thanks to this, the relationships in the new family were built in a completely different way. Cheryl never again faced the overprotectiveness that had so irritated her. When Melissa gave birth to a son, she accustomed him to dependence from childhood. This was absolutely right, and met with the support of Dr. Newberg, who was categorically opposed to excessive pampering and infantilism. He firmly believed that a person could only feel comfortable when they achieved something on their own. The world isn't divided into black and white. True, this realization comes only with age, when even troubles and sorrows are perceived as good. Because without them, there wouldn't be that notorious happiness which everyone so eagerly seeks, and which is so easy to lose.